Do you have to learn to draw before you can start painting? In this video, I'll be answering that question and a few others asked by my subscribers. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm actually going to sit down and have a cup of tea, and I'm going to work through some questions that I've been given, including the one I told you about at the start of the video. These are questions both from my subscribers on YouTube and from my Facebook group members. If you haven't joined the Facebook group yet, there's a link in the video description, and we're just going to jump in and answer your questions. So I've got my cup of tea here. I've got some Twinings Glow Tea, hashtag not sponsored, and apparently it's going to improve my skin. Now, the nonsense they put on the outside of tea packets is hilarious to me, but you know, we're always hopeful. So you will see me look down occasionally in this video because I'm reading from a piece of paper of printed out questions, and I won't clickbait you. I will start with the one that was at the beginning of the video. So I have got Amber Loves, who says, is it a must that you learn pencil drawing before other mediums like watercolour? What about watercolour pencils? Now, it's not essential that you learn to draw before you ever pick up a paintbrush. I mean, you know, imagine if I said to you, well, you've got to spend 2 years learning to draw before you can ever mess around with paint. And let's be honest, paint is such good fun, isn't it? So no, you don't have to learn to draw before starting to paint, but you should prioritise learning to draw. So learn to draw as you go along. Now, often people consider watercolour pencils to be almost like a stopgap between painting and drawing. So in other words, they'll start out drawing and then they'll move on to watercolour pencils because it seems to them to be an easy stepping stone between drawing and watercolour. Is it? I don't know. I actually find ordinary painting easier than painting with watercolour pencils. That's not to say that you will. So, you know, paint in any mediums that you like, but also learn to draw is the answer to that question. And I am going to be having some more watercolour pencils content coming up on this channel, as well as some more drawing videos because they are incredibly popular. And the funny thing is that I only really started teaching drawing because I needed to teach people how to draw to improve their painting. And yet on this channel, an awful lot of subscribers have come in through drawing. But I do think that most people who draw, not everybody of course, but most people who draw would also like to paint. So don't deny yourself the pleasure of playing with paint. But do remember that learning to draw is going to help to make your painting even better. At the end of the day, painting is really just drawing with a brush. So the manual dexterity and the mark making that it teaches you will improve your painting too. Question number 2, Karen says, how much mischief does Gimlet get into in the studio? Well, actually, not a lot in terms of actually, you know, causing damage to the things in the studio because I'm very neat and tidy. Most things are sort of, you know, in cupboards and drawers. I have got a very large table that has got almost like a cavity inside, so I store a lot of things in there. He does sometimes get in there, and actually he started jumping up on the table, which is really quite alarming. It's about 3 foot high, but you know, it's a high table, and he does launch himself and sort of land sometimes. But what he does more than cause trouble in the studio is sort of cause trouble while I'm filming. He's asleep at the moment, but often it's just that he wants food and he is obsessed with eating. You know, I'm trying to space out his meals, and so he will meow at me all the time, or he will even bite my feet. The other thing he does is that his favourite toys to play with are actually sort of little balls. He loves to chase a little ball around. And one of his favourite places to play with the little balls, and we've got sort of, you know, loads of these all around the house. One of his favourite places to play with these is in the upstairs hallway. And what happens is he knocks them through the banister because I've got banister with slats, and he knocks them through the banister, and then they travel from the top of the house to the bottom of the house to the wooden hallway downstairs. So you can imagine when I'm filming, there's a lot of editing, and most video editing is actually done by the audio, so you can see the different wavelengths, and you get so used to doing editing like this that you actually recognize, you know, I can recognize the sound of a paintbrush hitting a jam jar, or I can see a cough or a sneeze just by the shape of the audio. It's amazing how distinctive it is and how different it looks from speech. And I can actually recognize this sort of low, elongated thing that is a Gimlet meow. And mostly I edit them out. So next up, a question from Beth, and Beth says, I've been doing lots of tutorials. How do you start doing your own paintings and finding your own style? Now, a lot of people have trouble with this. It can, you know, you can get into a habit of following along with someone else's tutorial, and You will actually find that your results are better when you're following someone else's tutorial. I mean, they're just bound to be, aren't they? Because someone else has chosen all the colours, they're giving you the techniques, they're telling you what order to put things in. So when you try and do your own work, you're going to find that it's not as good as when you're following a tutorial. So you have to get over being worried about that, because that's just life. It is natural that when you try painting from scratch, you're not going to be doing quite as well initially as when you're following a tutorial. The thing to do is to go for things that you know are a little bit inside your comfort zone. So if you followed lots of landscape tutorials, maybe have a go at doing a very simple landscape by yourself. There are lots of free, copyright-free photograph sites online, so you can search for a similar picture. So maybe if you did a tutorial that was a certain type of landscape, say a snow scene, you could choose perhaps a different photograph that was also a snow scene, and you would still have that tutorial in your mind and you would have a few hints of how to approach it. I do have lots of videos on planning on this channel. I'm also making a few videos. Currently, I'm sort of doing my own work and I'm filming bits as I go along. So I'm going to do one video that's all about how I choose colours for each painting, and I'm going to do another video that's all about, how I put things down on the paper. In other words, which order do I do the background first or the background last, or a bit of half and half. So I think those tutorials are going to help you there as well. But the main thing is just to choose a really simple subject, choose something that you're used to painting, that you like painting, and just jump in and have a go. And don't be too worried if it's not as good as the results you get when you follow along. Because although you should be proud of your efforts when you do someone else's tutorial, remember that you have sort of a mix of your ability and the teaching artist's ability all sort of mixed into one painting. And it will take you some time to get used to painting your own things without that extra assistance. Next up, we have a question about paints from David. So David says, I have decided I want to start transitioning from student grade to professional grade paints. Good choice. I still have a lot of student paints that I hate to waste. How would you suggest I go about making that transition in a sensible way? So, David, what I usually do is I just replace the things that run out. Now, you will find that certain paint colours run out faster than other paint colours. Things like cerulean blue, lemon yellow, you're going to get through a lot more of those than strong staining colours like Prussian blue, which might seem to last ages. So I would just, as one of your colours runs out, I would replace it with the same colour or a similar colour from a professional range. Now that's assuming that you're reasonably happy with your student paints and that you're quite happy to continue using them. It's also, dependent, very much dependent when you're swapping paints out and you want to sort of go up a level on how much money you've got. Because if you're on a budget, then replacing your paints as you go along is a great thing to do. But what if money isn't an issue for you and you really, really hate your student paints? Then there's nothing wrong with actually just going out and replacing them. Now, you don't ever want to throw paints like that away, but there's all sorts of places that are grateful for art materials. I've actually done some workshops in some homes for very elderly people, and some of the art supplies there are shockingly bad quality, and your student paints would actually be much better than the ones they've got. You can also donate to schools or to thrift stores and charity shops, and other people will be very grateful for those paints. So it's really a matter of assessing the colours that you've got, considering what your budget is. If you really have a very, very low budget indeed and you just can't afford to fully move up to professional paints, then what I would do is I would just replace the colours that you are least happy with. So replacing them as they run out is one option, but another one is just to swatch your students' colours and see which ones you really don't like. Now, there's always a few in a student's range that just aren't very good at all, and they're usually the more expensive pigments, because the more expensive pigments are the pigments that will be swapped out. You want to look particularly at your blues. Things like cerulean, cobalt, ultramarine, these tend to be very expensive pigments, which means that in a student's range, most of the colours might be fine and your blues might be absolutely awful. Maybe there's one or two other colours, perhaps you've got a purple or a pink, and it's just not cutting the mustard. You might want to replace those ones first. So if the paints aren't terrible and you would like to use them up, then those are the two ways of doing it. Either replace them as they run out, or take a look at the ones you like the least and replace those, and then use the others up and upgrade to the professional ones as you use them up. So I have a very amusing question from Audrey now. Hello, Audrey. I know Audrey very well. Audrey says, what would you have chosen for your career if you hadn't chosen to become an artist? Well, There are a couple of ways of looking at this. Is it what I would have chosen if I could potentially do anything and had any kind of talent in all sorts of areas that I don't have talent in, or is it just an alternative career? Now, if it was something that I have zero talent in, I would love to be a singer. I would be one of those kind of classically trained singers who can kind of belt out those ballads, something like Shirley Bassey or Annie Lennox. I would really love to stand on stage and sing to people. As it turns out, I'm completely tone deaf, and singing to people would indeed make their ears bleed quite severely. So we'll have to leave that one on the table. So what about careers that I actually could do? Well, I did train in my early 20s to be a hairdresser. I didn't enjoy it very much, but that's something I did. I also worked for many years in office roles. A couple of other careers that I would really like. I'm very into sewing. I particularly like sort of messing around with dress patterns and sort of hacking patterns. So I think I could have been maybe a dress designer. I also really enjoy cooking, and sometimes think that if I had a second YouTube channel, if I ever get enough time, it might be a vegan cooking channel. Vegan cooking being my specialist subject since I don't eat meat. One other thing that could be a second career, and actually is a second career, is martial arts. So the sword on there is not just decorative. I do have lots of martial arts weapons, and I am actually currently training to be a martial arts instructor, although this is not something I will be paid for. It's a part-time hobby, and actually after I finish filming today, I'll be driving half an hour down the road. I'll be helping to teach a kids class and then participating in an adults class in Kung Fu. And as I said, I'm actually going through my instructor training currently, despite the fact that I didn't start until I was much older, and the possible stupidity of throwing myself into shoulder rolls and things when I'm over 50, always injuring myself. Nevertheless, I absolutely love it. So that's a sort of second career that I hope to be achieving within the next few years. If it doesn't kill me first, I'll keep you posted. If you are enjoying this video and getting some value from it, can I ask you please just to click that thumbs up, that like button? YouTube rewards videos with audience interaction, so if you like, share, subscribe, or leave me a comment, or indeed more questions, YouTube will push this video out to more people, and I can help to teach more people how to paint and draw. Next up, a question from Russ, and Russ says, who are some of your favourite artists and why? Well, actually, it may be a cliche, but I do love Van Gogh simply because of the emotion and the pattern and the colour in the paintings. I also really like Gustav Klimt because I'm always very drawn to repeating patterns and motifs like that. But I'll tell you the truth. The truth is that I don't actually look at other artists that much. I'm too busy working. And if I actually go somewhere, if there was a possibility of looking at an art exhibition of paintings, or there was a museum exhibition of something like Egyptian or Incas, I'd be in the museum straight away. I fell in love with Indiana Jones at a very young age, and those ancient artworks and that history, it's always much more interesting to me than a painting on a wall. And when I was young, you would often find me in the British Museum. Of course, it's still a type of art, but for some reason, I'm just much more inspired by that three-dimensional historical art than I am by paintings. Next, Vonnie asks, do I use any kind of fixative on my watercolours and what do I recommend? Well, the short answer is no. Professional artists don't usually put any kind of fixatives on watercolour paintings because they would generally be displayed under glass. Of course, there are fixatives available, but they're not really necessary. And because I was an exhibiting artist, putting some kind of fixative or doing anything that's a bit out of the ordinary can get you kicked out of exhibition spaces. The only thing that I would recommend if you want to display without a frame is Dolan's wax. It really is very good, but if you're a professional exhibiting artist, you do need to check first of all, because putting anything on your paintings could get them excluded from exhibitions. Next up, I have a question from Anna, so I'm going to need to read this one. Anna says, I have a question. I think it's related more to the fact that English is not my mother language. I understood the terms hard and soft edges, but lately I have been hearing about lost and found edges. Are they the same as hard and soft? Yes and no. So a lost edge is more what you would consider to be an area where you can't see the difference between one thing and another. That's not making any sense, is it? But think of the old master paintings where they had somebody's face and it was in such dark shadow and the background was dark that you couldn't see where the background ended and the face began. I'll try and put some kind of photograph up of something that I'm thinking would be a good example of this, but that's what is considered to be a lost edge. It's literally somewhere where you can't see where one object starts and the other object ends, or you can't see where a background and the edge of something starts and ends. It can also be used as sort of as a loose painting technique where you can just sort of fade something out. So yes, it would be a soft edge, but it's not quite exactly the same meaning. A lost edge is more about not being able to see where one thing ends and another thing starts. So Colleen asks a question and she says, can you recommend some art books on art styles, art history that you use for inspiration, techniques, or some of your favourite old masters artists? So I really think this should be another video, shouldn't it? I think I should make a video of book recommendations. Now, I don't have that many books on old masters. I have one or two on particular artists that I enjoy. I have more books actually on colour and colour mixing. And these would be the ones that I refer to most of all. As I said, I'm usually focused on my own work more than looking at other artists, but I do often go on some kind of deep dive looking to find out more about particular pigments or the way to mix certain colours. I've also got one or two books that are all about the history of colours and the history of pigments. There are some absolutely fascinating facts in there. In fact, I think I'm going to make a video just about that. As I said, for my own inspiration, I'm much more inspired by nature and by the things around me, and also by things like museum artifacts, than I am by paintings. Later this year, I'll be visiting Rome. This will be my second time visiting. I'm taking my daughter this time, and we're going to be going back into the Vatican. I went there very briefly, only for an hour or so, which is ridiculous because they do say that if you look at every object in the Vatican, it would take you 12 years. But nevertheless, things like that, so the Vatican obviously is a mix of 2D and 3D art. Things like that are really very inspiring to me. But I'm also just as likely to be inspired by a bit of the architecture there or the shape of a window than I am to be inspired by the actual art that I'm looking at. I always think that inspiration is everywhere. So Tanya asks how to choose a good reference photo and composition. Now this is a very good question, and it's another one that really requires a video of its own, but just a few things to be careful of. Now if you go to these sites which have copyright free photographs, what you'll find is that a lot of the photographs, very beautiful as they are, they're really designed for people that are making, leaflets to go in cafes or using those photographs in some kind of artistic way. And so all sorts of things will have been blurred and faded, and all sorts of filters will have been applied. So although the photograph may look good, they're not always very great for painting from. So when you look at a photograph on one of those sites, I want you to think about the practicalities of painting, and if the special effects that you're looking at more to make the photographer or the photograph look good, and whether they'll actually work in a painting. As I said, I may do a video all about this subject. Let me know in the comments if you'd like that one. So I thought we'd just have a little bit of fun now. And one of the things that you're always advised as a YouTuber or anybody that's got a following on social media is don't feed the trolls, never engage with people, never ever answer troll comments. And my friends, I try, but sometimes I just have to be a bit of a smart aleck. So I thought at the end of these videos, I'll just put up a few comments that I receive and some of the answers that I give. Most of the time, if people are just throwing hate, I do just ignore them. But sometimes I just have to give a little bit back. So do let me know in the comments if you like these more relaxed, informal, chatty style videos, if you like me answering subscribers' questions. Videos like this are much quicker to edit than actual art videos. Now, of course, I'll still be making those, but I'm trying to concentrate lately on making sort of bigger and better videos and having them a little bit less often, interspersing them with a few YouTube shorts as well. And I really enjoy answering questions, so let me know what you think. And of course, if you have any questions that you would like me to answer, leave those there too. I'd always make a note of them, even if I might not get to them immediately. And before you leave this video, don't forget to have a look in the video description because I've got lots of free stuff down there, including some free courses, free downloadable PDFs. I'll also put one of my most popular videos up for you to watch right now.